The name is Nilin. This time, you'll remember me.
Remember Me was released back in 2013 and the game was published by Capcom and developed by Dontnod Entertainment. While most people only know them for Life is Strange, Remember Me was actually their debut project, a really ambitious beginning with an interesting development cycle. The game started development in 2008, and before taking this shape, Remember Me was going to be a PlayStation 3 exclusive under Sony, and was initially called Adrift, taking place in a world that was flooded by global warming, with the key gameplay mechanic being the player using jet skis to navigate a coastal city. You could say it was a completely different game, and a much less interesting one. Later on, the team was interested in the concept of memory and started redesigning the game around that idea. But following creative disagreements between Dontnod and Sony, the project was cancelled, and then in 2011 the game was presented in Gamescom in hopes to gain some attention, and eventually it was picked up and funded by Capcom and became the game we have on our hands today. The game thematically was influenced by classic cyberpunk anime such as Akira and Ghost in the Shell, and the famous novel 1984. Aside from this, the team also wanted the game to be set in Paris, as the studio was based in there as well. And as a result, the game took place in the city of Neo Paris, a futuristic dystopian version of Paris that is controlled by one big entity and feels more mechanical than organic. And despite potential publishers claiming that a male character would be more successful, the director of the game, John Maxim, insisted to make the game have a female protagonist, as he wanted to portray the way technology would intersect emotion, intimacy, and identity. The gameplay also changed completely from what they initially imagined, now playing like an action-adventure game that mixes between the combat of the Batman Arkham series or Mad Max and the platforming from Uncharted or Tomb Raider. And despite all obstacles, Dontnod managed to finish the game and release it in June 2013. It was a huge milestone for them, their first full release, and a major technical accomplishment for such a small studio. They built their own engine, they designed a fully realized futuristic city, they got a memorable soundtrack, but while the vision was intact, the execution, well, not so much. But even if it didn't become a blockbuster hit, the game was a strong beginning and managed to have its own identity, and it laid the foundation for everything they'd go on to create. And believe it or not, what got everyone excited for Remember Me back in 2013 wasn't the fluid combat, the timeless graphics, or even the cinematic platforming. What set the game apart from other action-adventure games was an extremely ambitious idea, one that was tied to the narrative and the themes of the game, that being memory remixing, a gameplay mechanic that allows you to change the memories of other characters. But to understand why the concept of memory was an interesting decision that should have made a bigger impact, let me give you a glimpse of the deep story of Remember Me.
I held my husband's hand until the very last second. I can still feel the nails of his fingers sticking into mine, you know?
The first night he said to me, "Let's share our memories." I remember I was sort of afraid, but and he smiled.
The game starts with a very clear premise. We see people sharing their life experiences in an advertisement about something that completely changed their lives and made them able to relive their most impactful memories. They're talking about Sensen, the device on their back, which is a product made by a huge company called Memorize. It's essentially a device that allows people to save their memories and relive them as much as they would like to. But as you can tell, there's a catch. The device is used by all of Neo Paris. And Memorize isn't just a company, they're a political power that has access to wipe or alter people's memories. And that takes us to our protagonist, Nilin, who we control while her memory is still in the process of being wiped. A doctor comes to check on Nilin, asking her questions like if she remembers her name or what year it is. But the doctor is not doing this out of kindness. He wants to make sure that no trace of Nilin's memory is left, and after discovering that she still retains some small details, she's taken to get the rest of them wiped. On her way, she's contacted by a mysterious man, fittingly called Edge, who will help her escape from Memorize and will also give us a little background on what's happening and why she was captured in the first place. Nilin was a gifted memory hunter and part of an underground resistance that was trying to take down Memorize, called the Everests. She was also the only hunter who had the power to steal and alter memories, just like Memorize. That's why she was captured and labeled a criminal by them. After escaping, Edge will guide Nilin to a bar in the slums called the Leaking Brain, managed by her best friend Tommy, who's also a member of the Resistance. On her way, Nilin runs into zombie-like creatures called the Leapers. Edge explains that Leapers are people who are so addicted to reliving their own memories that their sense and device started degrading and slowly transformed them into these subhuman creatures, and they are now taking over the slums with New Paris while being totally ignored by the upper class. And this takes us to our first combat sequence. To be honest, combat could be the best or the worst part of the game depending on who you ask. The main gimmick of the combat is a system called the Combo Lab, where you can mix and match between presents to create your own combo. Presents are simply just different kicks and punches that provide bonuses like healing, cooldown, or extra damage. It's a brilliant idea on paper, but it's kind of undercooked. Here's the problem. While the system gives you a lot of freedom, in practice the combat could be floaty at times. There's no free-form targeting, no mid-combo adaptation, and the animation priority locks you into these long wind-ups that feel clunky compared to other fluid action games. It wants to be customizable like a fighting game, but it handles more like a tech demo at times. And then there's the enemy design. You're often locked in arenas fighting waves of the same enemy types, leapers, robots, or elite guards, and each one has specific counters. Some can only be damaged with certain moves or special abilities, which limits how much fun you can have with your build. You're not improvising, you're solving combat puzzles, and once you get used to it, it's mostly about repetition. But aside from your standard combat, you also have 5 other different abilities that might add some flavor to the gameplay. Stuff like going invisible and taking down enemies in one hit, or hijacking a robot to make it explode or attack its allies. Some of these moves are flashy, satisfying, and tied into the tech-heavy themes of the story. It's just a shame that they take a while to charge up and don't feel as fluid as they look. The rest of the gameplay is more conventional. You've got your standard third-person platforming, climbing pipes, shimmying across ledges, and light puzzles every now and then. It's fine, but it's guided by directional arrows on the screen most of the time, so that platforming never really becomes a challenge. It feels more like a graphical showcase than an actual gameplay system. It was very easy to control, and I still admire it for showing off some gorgeous backdrops or interesting locations that highlighted the design of New Paris. However, that's enough gameplay for now. Let's dive deeper into the more interesting parts of Remember Me. Nilin fights a few more Leapers on her way and eventually reaches Tommy. He's just your typical laid-back old friend who doesn't provide any actual value to the story, but he's nice to have around. He gets too casual with Nilin, but she doesn't even know him at this point, so she's very cautious and uncomfortable around him. And right after meeting him, they're both attacked by Olga Sedova, a bounty hunter who's trying to hand over Nilin to memorize again. Instead of fighting back, Nilin dives into her mind in an attempt to alter her memories. And this takes us to remixing. It essentially allows you to mess around with people's memories and cause multiple different outcomes, with all of them being optional except for the one that is required to move on with the story. In this case, Nilin aims to make Olga believe that the doctor from Memorize ended the life of her husband David, instead of saving him from transforming into a leaper. So the game lets you mess around with this memory in a few ways, like unlocking the straps on his hand so he would attack the doctor, or messing with the doctor's equipment so it would end Olga's life in the memory instead of him. It was honestly fun to see the different ways I could interact with each memory, and trying to get all of the different outcomes. However, the only thing that's holding this feature back from being extremely groundbreaking is the fact that each memory is self-contained. Achieving any optional outcome would just result in making you rewind the memory and then making the right changes to complete the sequence. So it feels more like a puzzle or an interactive cutscene, and less like a gameplay mechanic. It sort of plays like the brain dance from Cyberpunk 2077, except it's a bit more interactive. I still think remixing was an idea ahead of its time, and I can't help but respect the fact that Dontnod was trying to make the game stand out with a unique feature. It was definitely the highlight of the game, even though it could have used some more polishing. It would have been great if it had allowed some different story routes or even some dialogue changes, but aside from the gameplay perspective, I think remixing had a weak presentation in the story. Let me show you why.
I'm not here to take you in. Do you still plan to take down Memorize?
Yes.
Then we share the same enemy.
Well, there's a turnaround.
After remixing Olga's memories, she immediately switches teams. Just like that, no build-up, no resistance. She just goes from trying to capture Nilin to immediately being the #1 enemy of Memorize. And even though you could argue that Nilin is a skilled memory hunter, it doesn't change the fact that the way remixing was presented in the story removes any element of tension, especially later on in the more important parts of the story. And also Olga herself is simply a glorified NPC. The previous cutscene was 1 out of the 2 times that we meet her, and she only acts as a transportation method for Nilin. She literally has no character development or any other role in the story, which is a shame because it would have been fun if she acted as a threat for Nilin throughout the story, or even an ally that would assist Nilin in combat. Instead of being a remixing lab rat, this is one of the problems with the story. Poor pacing and rushed characters is a trend that we'll keep seeing throughout the game. But going back to the story, so after switching sides, Olga will transport Nilin to her next mission. Nilin needs to steal the design of the Saint Michel Dam from the mind of the most famous architect in Neo Paris. Her mind has every detail for every building she designed. In order to get through Memorized security, Nilin will need the help of another member of the Resistance, codenamed Bad Request, so she needs to find him first before stealing the codes. So on my way, I decided to take the time and navigate the streets of Saint Michel. And let me tell you, this was definitely my favorite location in the game. It's a graphical feast, and it's extremely faithful to the themes of the game. This stage uses the world building from the first few hours to present something meaningful. You can see the drones and robots all over the place, and the brainwashed upper class are going about their lives and using their sensing devices for basically everything. You can also find advertisement for Memorized technology all over the place. And we can find ads for something called The Christmas Show, broadcasted by Kid Christmas, a previous member of the Resistance who's now on the side of Memorize. He announces that he will take down Nilin later on, and he will broadcast it to his live show, but she ignores him for now and keeps a low profile, and eventually finds Bad Request. Bad Request talks about how he used to be her biggest fan before she lost her memory, and after having a really awkward conversation, he will act as a guide throughout the stage by leaving traces that would help Nilin get through security systems, and then he fades into the background with all of the other forgettable characters, at least for now. The mission goes as easy as you'd expect, and Nilin will get the info she needed. However, Dontnod wanted to end the stage with a bang. Enter Kid Christmas, your first real boss fight. I really enjoyed this boss fight in terms of gameplay and visuals, but this guy is extremely bare bones, and it feels like he was shoved in to act as a cool boss at the end of the stage. I really like the idea of having a previous Resistance member being one of the antagonists, but he also suffers from the same issues as the other characters. He barely has any backstory and he's extremely forgettable. But at least after defeating him, we gain his signature weapon, the Spammer, a ranged weapon that adds an extra fun mechanic to the game. You can use it to knock down flying or crawling enemies, breaking objects or solving puzzles. It becomes very useful later on without feeling too powerful or overshadowing melee combat, and it fits extremely well with the rest of Nilin's moveset. But back again to the story. After getting the information he needs, Edge reveals that his plan was for Nilin to infiltrate the Bastille, the same prison she was trapped in at the beginning of the game, to get her lost memories back and set her comrades free. But the Bastille is an underwater prison, so it's not exactly easy to access. But with the designs that she stole from the previous mission, Edge will be able to open the Saint Michel Dam, flooding the upper district in Saint Michel and draining out the slums. This would allow Nilin to use the chance to infiltrate the prison. But again, she would need the help of someone who knows the ins and outs of the place, that being Dr. Johnny Greenteeth, who used to work at Memorize but is now living in the slums. So here we go again, trying to find another person we barely know anything about. What could possibly go wrong?
Johnny? Johnny Greenteeth?
Another injection! Doctor, I'm hurt, Doctor.
Well, it seems that Mr. Greenteeth became a leaper, so Nilin has no other option than to press on and infiltrate the prison by herself. So she follows the footsteps of Johnny to navigate a minefield, and then she encounters our second boss fight, a memorized robot called Zorn, and despite having some really intimidating animations, his part was extremely basic. You can't deal damage to him in melee combat, so you simply have to dodge it and shoot down its arms, and then finish it off with a quick time event. And after defeating it, we finally enter the Bastille prison. The plan is to steal access to the memory surface from Madame, the owner of the prison, a sadistic power freak that loves to show her authority around the place. Another one-dimensional character that is comically evil, but with a twist. Nilin finds out that she captured Bad Request and she's torturing him for fun. However, Nilin uses the chance to steal the access in hopes to get back to him later. But it turns out that Madame was one step ahead. She allowed Nilin to steal a fake memory that trapped her in a domain expansion. She gets attacked by virtual enemies inside the memory, and then we end up fighting Madame herself. This chapter was honestly the best way to present the concept of memory manipulation, from a story and gameplay standpoint. I wish they had done something similar with the other characters to make them more interesting. Stealing memories this time was deceptively easy, but had a nice payoff. Even Madame's boss fight was a challenge, and required you to use the majority of your moveset to win. With Madame defeated, the memories of everyone who was trapped in the Bastille are released. Nilin also regains some of her memories. She remembers the crime that landed her in the Bastille before all of this happened. On a mission, she altered the mind of a memorized commander and made him believe that he took the life of his girlfriend, which led him to take his own as well. And after learning the truth, Nilin hesitates to go with the rest of the plan. However, Edge on the other hand thinks that the end justifies the means, and he doesn't care about how many losses the upper class would take if it means that they can take down Memorize. So Nilin keeps going with the plan and hopes to do something right. She remixes the mind of the Memorize CEO, Scylla Cartier-Wells. She wanted to make her feel guilty for the damage her company had caused in New Paris. And while remixing the memory, we're met with a very unexpected detail.
Did you find Jax?
Jax! Yes, I did. And next year, you're the one on birthday detail. Your daughter has been impossible ever since she saw me buy her gift.
Can I have it now? Please?
I spent the day at the lab. Did you have the time to read
Hello,
my memo
Papa.
on memorial
Just
therapy?
finished shopping with Mummy.
Hello there, my little smarty. Behave yourself with your mother, promise?
Mummy, look!
Nilin, sit back down. Nilin, sit down right now!
Child locks engaged.
Mummy's just trying to keep you safe. We must never do that again. Okay? Nilin! Mummy told you! See what happens? Nilin! My leg! This is your fault!
I'm sorry, Mummy. I'm sorry.
Nilin is the daughter of the Memorize CEO, and she was the reason both of them had a car crash that left Scylla with physical and emotional scars, making her a hateful person who wanted to use her power to control all of New Paris. Definitely no one saw this coming, and I love the fact that this plot twist was left inside the remixing sequence. These unexpected moments are the ones that made this game memorable for me after all these years. Specifically this memory sequence. It's the most iconic scene in the game, and I'm sure anybody who played it before can agree that this was such an immersive way to tell a story. And let me tell you that this will not be the last surprise the game has for us. So after remixing Scylla's memories, she becomes compassionate. She pulls back on the plans of Memorize and orders all of the Memorize staff to go home for the day. Most of them leave except for Dr. Quaid, who had a bigger plan in mind. Dr. Quaid wants to take control of the Leapers through their sensing devices, to make a private army for Memorize. We can even see some prototypes controlled by Memorize soldiers. Nilin wants to stop him, but she first needs to find Bad Request. We find out that his memories were completely wiped, and he was going to be used for the same project. On a side note, he also calls Nilin his lost sister for some reason, and she responds in kind by calling him brother. I'm not sure if this was meant in the literal sense, and it's never explained later on, but I thought I should mention it anyway. Also an interesting detail here that Dr. Quaid was the same doctor who was about to wipe the rest of Nilin's memories at the beginning of the game, which means that he was planning to use her for the same project and turn her into a Leaper. And hey, remember Johnny Greenteeth? Well, he's back and he wants to take revenge on his previous colleague. It seems that Dr. Quaid experimented on him, and he was also the reason he was transformed. So Johnny takes care of Quaid and initiates a self-destruction sequence for the entire prison, and then he tries to take down Nilin with him before she escapes. His boss fight was simply just a more annoying version of the Invisible Leapers. You have to expose him by using one of your abilities, hit him a few times, and then wait for your cooldowns, and rinse repeat. He almost takes Nilin down, but Bad Request sacrifices himself in order to give her a chance to escape. I know this was supposed to be a sad moment in the story, but we barely know Bad Request. A couple of hours ago, he was just a forgettable fanboy, and then suddenly both of them are quote-unquote brother and sister, and then he sacrifices himself and dies. It's like Bad Request was added to the game for dramatic effect, but each time he appeared on screen was laughably bad. But moving on, with all of Memorize's secret operations taken down, Edge will give us one final quest. We have to destroy H3O, which is essentially the control Memorize server. Olga will show up for the second time to give us the final bite, and after defeating some guards, solving puzzles, and jumping around the place, Nilin almost reaches the server, but she ends up finding her father Charles, the man who created the Sensen alongside the other Memorize technology. He was destroyed by the accident that happened to his family, and he trapped himself inside a memory of the past, so he would be able to keep his happy life with his wife and daughter. But Nilin tries to remix his memories in order to make him move on. Initially, Nilin was his first experiment, and he successfully made her forget the accident by remixing her memories. So Nilin remixes his memories in order to make him believe that he ended her life in the process. And after doing so, she immediately goes to meet him, and he's happy enough to see her alive that he granted her access to the Memorize servers. Inside, we find our last revelation and the final boss of the game.
I hadn't relived your memories for a long time. I almost forgot how much they hurt.
How's that? Relived?
So much pain, sister. And for such a long time, so empty, so true.
Edge, you're starting to scare me.
Keep going, little sister. H3O must disappear.
Back to where it all started.
Yes. It's here that you gave birth to me.
Don't you find the expression a little abusive, brother?
It's just a question of perspective. When did you figure it out?
Just now. Edge is H3O. It hit me. It's obvious.
I really want to die. I didn't lie to you.
Who are you? Really?
I am Edge. I am a spontaneous entity born from the putrid pits where everyone flushed their most horrible and painful memories. I am H3O. My first memories are the tears of a girl. I am the child of Memorize and its worst enemy. I am the father of the Leapers and their grim reaper. I am your friend. You must kill me.
I'm sure you all expected Edge would be the final boss, but they managed to do it in a slightly unexpected way. Edge was the amalgamation of the painful memories that were neglected inside the Memorize system. The resistance and the entire plan was just Edge asking for a mercy shot from Nilin. He became sentient and edgy enough that all he wanted was to die, and after giving him his final wish, we're treated to the ending cutscene.
A friend once said, "The memory of a single man is a fortress, more complex than the vastest of cities." But we invented a key to the fortress. There are no secrets anymore. My friend's name was Edge. Born from the sense and abuses, he was the first to understand that we were all floating adrift. Edge died to remind us that some intimate doors are not supposed to be opened, and that suffering, like painful memories, is just part of life. My name is Nilin Cartier-Wells. I am a memory hunter. I can know everything about you, and I can make you believe whatever I want. This is my gift. My legacy. For the first time in my life, I remember exactly who I am. outside my fortress, I now have a family to go back to, and a world to confront. A damaged world. A world to heal. This is what my friend taught me before he disappeared. I'll never forget him.
Obviously, this cutscene did not give a satisfying outcome for everything that happened in the story. We still had so many unanswered questions. Like what's gonna happen to Nilin after finally being with her family? Or what happened to all the people who had sensing devices? Well, I can only assume that this was intentional, as by 2015, Dontnod had already completed the story for a possible sequel. Director John Maxim said that the story for Remember Me 2 was already written, and they knew what to add and what they needed to fix. But the decision was up to Capcom, and it seems that Capcom did not agree, which was honestly understandable. The CEO of Dontnod himself, Oscar Gilbert, admitted that while the game did okay, it was Life is Strange's unexpected success that saved the company from a very difficult financial situation. The game had average reviews at best from both fans and critics, and it definitely had some flaws. The combat system, while impactful, didn't click with most people. The story felt rushed and barely complete, and having a female protagonist didn't appeal enough to the market. I'm not gonna lie, as much as I love a good female protagonist, people back then were more interested in the strong male archetype. Kratos, Shepard, Ezio, or even Voss from Far Cry 3, which was more iconic than the game protagonist himself. These types of characters made a huge impact on the gaming landscape, and each one had a striking personality that you can feel through game covers or screenshots. We definitely had some iconic female protagonists, but Nilin didn't have the look, personality, or power that qualified her to be one of them. You can say that she was too human. She's exactly what John Maxim wanted to have in his game, which is great, but needs a lot of work to fit within the action-adventure genre, and I can assume that's what led the team to try something different with future games like Life is Strange. The game had also gone unnoticed for multiple different reasons. Despite being published by one of the biggest names in the industry, as I mentioned, 2013 was packed with some of the best games of all time, and most of them were either a few weeks or a few months away. So the spotlight was already stolen from this game before it even came out. And instead of giving certain names, let me show you just a few major releases on screen. I'm sure by now you have at least seen one of the best games you've ever played. Gamers back then didn't have any time to breathe, and they were not ready to waste their money on a new IP. Another factor being that the PlayStation 4 was just about to hit the market in November of 2013. So the game released around the end of a console generation, which was the worst time to release a new title, from a studio that didn't establish a name for itself yet. But despite all of this, the game achieved over 2 million players after being added to the PlayStation Plus on October 2013 and once again in February of 2014. And by 2016, the game ended up being a Platinum Capcom title and sold over 1 million copies. A decent number that barely managed to get Dontnod back on its feet, but not enough to make Remember Me stick around for more. So overall, Remember Me was an interesting title that tried to step out of the shadow of other action-adventure games. It's a game that wanted to be stylish and futuristic, and it succeeded in doing so, but it came over the cost of substance. It's a game that had tons of wasted potential, but those who played it still remember it fondly for what it was. People played it once, had a good time with it, and moved on. It was not a masterpiece by any means, but that doesn't mean it should be forgotten. I just replayed it 1 week before recording this, and I had a pretty decent time, and it made me interested in making my first video to talk about it. And if this game had a sequel, I would have definitely wanted to give it a shot. So tell me what you think about Remember Me in the comments, and if you played it before, let me know your thoughts on the game. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It took extremely way more time than anticipated to make, so I want to thank you all if you stuck around this long. And if you would like to see more deep dives and retrospectives, subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to me. This was your final boss, and I will be waiting for you in future videos.